Ever get that feeling? Like, you look around and your team, everybody's working hard, putting in the time, but somehow things just aren't clicking.
Yeah.
You're not quite hitting those goals.
Yeah, it's
It's
frustrating.
like one of those puzzles where you've got all the pieces, but the picture's not coming together.
Exactly.
So that's what we're digging into today on the deep dive. Why teams, even those with good intentions, sometimes fall short.
And more importantly, we're going to look at how to turn that around.
Quickly. Yeah. No one wants to wait months to see results, right?
Right.
We've gone through a ton of research, articles, reports, you name it.
Yeah, we've really tried to distill it down to the most actionable stuff.
So consider this your fast-track guide to transforming those underperforming teams into, real high achievers.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's not just about, going over the basics again.
Right.
I mean, you've probably heard a lot of these management principles before,
Right.
but we're aiming to kind of give you some fresh perspectives on why teams struggle. And even more importantly, what you can actually do about it.
Practical steps.
Yeah, things you can start using right away.
So we'll be pulling from the source material we have, of course.
Yeah, and then we're also going to tie in some of those classic business books.
The stuff that stood the test of time.
Exactly.
So think of this as a focused download to really level up your team's performance.
And our mission here is pretty straightforward.
Yeah.
We want to give you that clear understanding of what usually causes those team hiccups. And then, of course, arm you with some solid strategies to, tackle them head on.
Head on, yeah.
We're going to look at everything from, like, making sure everyone's on the same page about the goals
Right.
to how the team communicates or sometimes doesn't communicate well.
Yeah, communication is huge.
Huge. And then we'll even touch on why trying to micromanage everything can actually backfire.
Ooh, micromanagement. That's a big one.
It is. So where should we start with all of this?
I think, our source really hits on a good starting point, and that's the foundation of any good team. Clear goals and expectations.
Sounds obvious, right?
I know.
But it's amazing how often this trips teams up.
It's true.
It's almost like trying to, find your way around with a map that's all blurry.
Oh, I like that analogy.
You're putting in effort, you're moving,
Yeah.
but are you going in the right direction? Who knows?
Yeah.
And our source actually uses a good example about this, a marketing team. And their goal is, like, increased brand awareness.
Okay. Yeah.
Sounds good on the surface.
Right.
But how do you actually measure that?
Exactly.
Like, what are the specifics?
Yeah.
Without something concrete, like, we want to see social media engagement jump by 20% in the next 3 months, how do you even know if you're succeeding?
And how do you prioritize what you're doing?
Yeah, exactly. It's easy to end up with a lot of activity, but not a lot of actual impact.
Busy work, right?
Total busy work.
And I think what's interesting here, everyone throws around SMART goals these days.
Oh, yeah.
But there's a trap there, too.
What's that?
People get stuck on that measurable part, the numbers, but they forget about relevant.
Ah, so it's not just about hitting some arbitrary number.
Right. It's got to be tied to something bigger.
Right. To the overall strategic goals.
Exactly. Our source, they don't explicitly say it, but it's implied,
That those goals need to actually matter.
Exact.
Not just be some number we're chasing.
Yeah. And if it doesn't matter, why are we even doing it?
Right. It all goes back to why. And the source also talks about how crucial individual contribution is.
Okay, yeah.
Like, when each person on the team understands how their work fits into those big goals, it gives them a sense of ownership, right?
It makes them feel like they're part of something bigger.
Exactly. And then regular check-ins are super important, too.
Yeah, for sure.
Not just to, like, see how far along you are, but also to maybe adjust course if you need to.
To make sure everyone's still on the same page.
Exactly.
And, if you look at the big picture of, like, management theory,
Yeah,
this focus on clear objectives, it's a cornerstone, right?
that makes sense.
Think of Peter Drucker's book, The Effective Executive.
Oh, yeah, classic.
Everyone always talks about how he stressed setting goals.
Right.
But he also talks about something that maybe people don't pick up on as much.
What's that?
It's about prioritizing based on what's the best opportunity rather than just reacting to problems all the time.
Interesting. So you use clear goals to figure out what's really worth focusing on.
Exactly. Focus your team's energy where it'll have the biggest impact.
Okay, so you've got your destination, right? Everyone knows where you're headed. But what happens when the communication within the team gets messed up?
Oh, that's a recipe for disaster.
It is. And that brings us to our next big point. Poor communication.
I think of it like It's like drag,
Grad.
Yeah, like in aerodynamics. It creates friction, slows things down.
So poor communication is basically slowing the whole team down.
Big time. And it can lead to so many problems.
Like what?
People doing the same work twice because they didn't know someone else was already on it.
Oh, yeah.
Or even straight up mistakes because information wasn't shared properly.
Oh. I've been there.
And when people don't feel comfortable, speaking up or sharing their ideas, the whole team suffers, right?
Yeah, it's like you're missing out on all that brain power.
Exactly.
And the source has a really good example about this, too.
Oh, yeah.
It's about a software development team. Imagine you've got the product manager, the person who's supposed to be laying out the priorities.
Yeah.
Right? But they're not clear about which features are the most important.
Uh-oh.
So what happens? The developers might spend a ton of time on something that's actually pretty low priority.
Well, the crucial stuff gets neglected.
Exactly. It's like a chain reaction of wasted effort and missed deadlines.
And the crazy thing is, right, we live in this world where everyone's connected all the time.
You'd think communication would be easy.
You would, right. But these breakdowns still happen all the time.
So what can you do about it?
Well, the source really advocates for building a culture where people can talk openly.
Okay, so like an open door policy kind of thing?
Kind of, but it's more than that. It's about creating a space where people feel safe to speak their minds, even if they disagree.
So like psychological safety.
Exactly. And yeah, of course, using tools like Slack or Microsoft Teams can help keep information flowing.
Streamline things.
Yeah, but the core of it is encouraging real two-way communication.
Got it.
And don't forget about feedback.
Right, not just giving it, but asking for it too.
Exactly. Regularly ask your team how things are going, what could be improved.
So you can catch those communication gaps early on.
Exactly.
And it's not just about, the everyday chit-chat. It's also about how you handle those tough conversations.
Ooh, yeah.
The ones where the stakes are high and people have different opinions, conflict. And the source actually points to a book that talks about this, Crucial Conversations.
Oh, yeah, I've heard of that one.
It gives you practical ways to, actually navigate those situations effectively.
Because, let's be real, every team's going to have those moments.
For sure.
Where clear communication is make or break.
Okay, so we've talked about having clear goals.
Yeah.
And making sure communication is flowing smoothly.
Check and check.
But even with all that in place, what happens if no one feels responsible for actually making things happen?
Oh, yeah. You can have the best plans in the world, the best communication.
Right.
If there's no accountability, it all falls apart.
That's our next topic then.
Right.
Lack of accountability.
Hit it right on the head.
And this can be a sneaky problem because, well, it can show up in lots of ways. Missed deadlines, quality slipping.
Morale takes a hit.
Yeah, it all starts to go downhill. And it's because of this, unspoken idea that someone else will take care of it.
Yeah, it's easy to fall into that trap.
It is.
And the source uses a sales team as an example here.
Okay.
Imagine they have these overall sales goals, right? But no one's individually responsible for hitting a certain number.
Oh, I see. So there's no clear connection between what each person does and the overall target.
Exactly. And what happens?
They probably miss their sales goals.
Most likely. And it impacts the whole company, right?
Revenue takes a hit.
Yep. And without that sense of ownership, where your work actually makes a difference.
People lose motivation.
Exactly.
So how do you fix that? How do you build that accountability?
Well, the source is pretty clear on this one. You got to define roles and responsibilities, make it crystal clear who's accountable for what.
No ambiguity.
None. And then, use data. Track performance based on actual metrics.
So it's not just someone's opinion. It's based on facts.
Exactly.
But it's not just about the numbers, right?
Right.
The source also talks about recognizing and rewarding people who actually step up and take ownership.
Publicly, too, right?
Yeah, make it a big deal.
Celebrate those wins.
Exactly. Because that can be so motivating for the whole team.
It sets a good example.
It does.
And if we connect this to, what really motivates people.
Okay.
There's a great book by Daniel Pink, Drive.
I've heard of that one.
He talks about these three things: autonomy, mastery, and purpose.
Those are powerful.
They are. And when people feel accountable for something specific and their work is recognized, it taps into all three.
Makes them feel valued.
Exactly. And it makes them want to take ownership and do their best work.
Now let's flip that around for a second.
Okay.
What happens when those things, that sense of purpose, the feeling of being valued, what happens when that starts to disappear?
Ooh. That's a tough one. You end up with low morale and engagement.
And that can be a real silent killer for a team.
Absolutely. Because it shows up in all these subtle ways.
Like what?
Well, productivity dips.
Makes sense.
People start leaving.
Turnover goes up.
Yeah, it costs the company a lot of money and time.
And low morale, it can come from so many places.
Right.
People burning out because they're overworked.
Yep.
Feeling like their efforts aren't appreciated.
That comes all the time.
Or even just a negative work environment where people don't feel supported.
It can be toxic even.
Yeah.
And when people feel like that, like they don't matter, their motivation just goes out the window.
Totally.
They don't care as much about the team succeeding.
The source uses a really good example here about a customer service team.
Okay.
They're dealing with like a crazy number of calls.
Overwhelmed.
Yeah. And they don't have enough support to handle it all.
So they're set up to fail, almost.
Yeah, it's a recipe for disaster. They get stressed. They can't help the customers properly.
Frustrating for everyone.
Totally frustrating. And what happens? People start quitting.
High turnover.
Yeah.
And fixing this, it's not about like throwing pizza parties or giving out little bonuses.
It's got to be deeper than that.
It does. The source talks about showing genuine appreciation for the work people are doing.
Okay, yeah.
And making sure they have a good work-life balance.
Like flexible schedules, working from home, that kind of thing.
Exactly. And creating an environment where everyone feels included and respected no matter who they are.
Where they feel safe to be themselves.
Yes. All of that helps create a sense of belonging.
And that can make a huge difference in how people feel about their work.
Huge.
And the leader plays a big role in all this.
Oh, absolutely. The leader sets the tone.
The source mentions a book that's really relevant here, Leaders Eat Last by Simon Sinek.
Oh, that's a good one.
It's all about how leaders need to put their team's well-being first.
Yeah, create that sense of safety.
Because when people feel like their leader actually cares about them, it builds trust.
Right. Okay.
And they're more likely to be engaged and committed to the team's success.
Okay, so we've talked about supporting the team, making them feel valued.
Right.
But what about their actual skills and knowledge?
Ah, that's a good point. Because if they don't have the right tools in their toolbox...
It's tough to perform at their best.
Exactly. And that's our next topic. Inadequate training and development.
Big one, especially these days.
Things are changing so fast.
All the time.
If you're not constantly learning and growing, it's easy to fall behind.
And it can be really demoralizing for people, you know?
To be asked to do something they haven't been trained for.
Exactly. They're set up to fail.
The source talks about this digital marketing team.
Okay.
They're using all these outdated SEO techniques.
Oh, no.
Because they haven't been trained on the latest algorithms and stuff.
Well, they're working hard, but
it's not going to get them the results they need.
Right.
No matter how much effort they put in.
So the key takeaway here is that training and development, it's not a one-time thing.
It's got to be ongoing.
Exactly. It's an investment in your team's future.
And the source suggests offering a bunch of different learning opportunities.
Like what?
Formal workshops, online courses, mentorship programs.
Oh, I like the mentorship idea.
And even just encouraging people to take on new challenges that help them develop new skills.
Get them out of their comfort zone.
Exactly. And of course, you got to keep up with what's happening in your industry.
Yeah, the trends, the new tools.
Make sure your team has access to all of that.
There's a great book that talks about this, The Fifth Discipline by Peter Senge.
I've heard of that one, but I haven't read it.
It's all about creating a learning organization.
What does that mean?
It means building a culture where learning and adapting is just part of how you do things.
So it's not just about filling in knowledge gaps.
Right.
It's about always being open to new ideas, to change, to growing as a team.
Exactly.
Okay, we've talked about a lot of ways to support and develop a team.
Yeah, we have.
But there's one thing that can absolutely kill team performance.
Yeah.
Even if you're doing everything else right.
Oh, I know what you're going to say. Micromanagement.
Bingo.
It's the worst.
It can be so tempting though, right?
I get it. You want to make sure things are done right, especially if the deadline's looming.
Yeah, you want to control everything. But the thing is, when you're constantly looking over everyone's shoulder and second-guessing their every decision,
what happens?
it actually backfires. Big time.
How so?
Well, first of all, it stifles creativity. People are afraid to try new things because they're worried you won't approve.
They're just waiting for instructions.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it also takes away their sense of ownership.
Their autonomy, yeah.
They feel like they're not trusted to do their job.
And that's demoralizing.
Incredibly demoralizing.
Yeah.
The source actually gives an example of this with a project manager who has to approve every little task, every decision.
Oh, I worked at that
It
type.
creates these bottlenecks.
Slows everything down.
Everything grinds to a halt. And, on a deeper level, it sends a message that you don't trust your team.
And if you don't trust them, why are they even there?
Exactly.
So what's the alternative? How do you avoid being that micromanager?
It all comes down to delegation.
Oh,
Trusting your team to do the work.
giving them ownership.
Exactly. And focus on the results you want, not on dictating every step of the process.
Give them the freedom to figure things out.
Exactly. And of course, be there to support them if they need help.
But don't hover.
No hovering. There's a great book about this, Turn the Ship Around, by L. David Marquet.
I've heard good things about that one.
He was a Navy captain, and he completely transformed the way his submarine crew worked
How'd he do that?
by empowering them to make decisions. He basically flipped the traditional top-down leadership model on its head.
Sounds like a fascinating read.
It is, and it really highlights how damaging micromanagement can be.
And how powerful it is to actually trust your team.
Okay, so let's take a step back and look at everything we've talked about.
All right, what's the big picture?
We've identified 6 major things that can cause a team to underperform.
Okay, hit me.
First, not having clear goals and expectations.
Yeah.
Second, poor communication. Third, lack of accountability.
Got it.
Fourth, low morale and engagement. Fifth, not enough training and development.
Right.
And sixth, the killer, micromanagement.
It's a nasty one.
It is. And our source makes it really clear. There's no magic bullet to fix these problems.
Yeah, you can't just snap your fingers and expect everything to be perfect.
Right. It takes a multi-pronged approach.
You got to address all these different elements.
And you need strong leadership.
Leaders who actually care about their team.
Exactly. And everyone needs to be committed to constantly improving and adapting.
It's a journey, not a destination.
It really is. And it's important to remember that every team is different.
Right. What works for one team might not work for another.
So you've got to find what works for your team in your context. But the good news is,
There is good news.
There is.
I'm listening.
if you focus on those core principles we've talked about today,
Which are?
having a clear purpose,
Okay.
communicating effectively, openly,
Yeah.
making sure people feel responsible for their work,
Uh-huh.
prioritizing their well-being, investing in their growth and development,
Yes.
and of course, trusting them to do their job.
It's huge.
Huge. If you do those things, you're setting yourself up for success. It's like building a solid foundation for your team.
I like that. A solid foundation.
And our source ends with a really thought-provoking quote from John C. Maxwell. He says, "A leader is one who knows the way, goes the way, and shows the way."
That's good. So simple, but powerful.
So think about it. In which of these areas that we've talked about today,
Mm-hmm.
do you have the biggest opportunity to show the way for your team right now?
Yeah, what's that one thing you can do starting tomorrow to make a real difference?
It's a great question to reflect on.
It is.
And I hope this deep dive has given you some new ideas, some practical things you can actually use.
We've covered a lot of ground.
We have. And we encourage you to, keep exploring these concepts, see how they apply to your own experience.
Your own team.
Exactly. Thanks for joining us on this journey.
It's been a pleasure.